Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Sunil Khosla, your host for the day. So, we are back with the second episode of the AGS Horizon Presents Global PayTech Podcast. And a very warm welcome to all of you joining from across the world. And we've got something special yet again. If you've missed the first episode, fret not. We have shared the links for the parts down in the description. Now, let us know our guest. While the first episode covered diplomatic relations and global synergies, this episode will have more emphasis on our primary focus area, that is, payments. And we have a perfect guest to lead the conversation. So, join me in welcoming the expert speaker for the day, Ms. Ivy Lu. In a career spanning about 20 years, Ms. Lu have donned several caps across different organizations. Before leading products as the director at Nanopay Corporation, she was vice president at Citibank. So hello again, Ivy. Good morning to you and a very, very warm welcome from Global PayTech Podcast. And thank you for finding time to have a short chat with us. Now, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. So I'm Ivy Lu, the director of payments at Nanopay. Just a bit of background, we're a Canadian FinTech, and we offer payment technology solutions to banks and to businesses.
Thanks, Ivy. So let's start now. So, of course, we know Nanopay, but probably the world needs to know Nanopay more. So give us a few words on what Nanopay is all about and how do you describe your journey that you've done so far?
Sure. So mentioned Nanopay is a Canadian FinTech company. We're located in Toronto, Canada. We offer payment technology solutions to businesses and to banks. So at a very high level, we have two major streams of businesses. We offer domestic and cross-border solutions to businesses. And then we also partner with banks for different cash and liquidity management solutions. We've been around for about, I would say, 6 years. And my journey at Nanopay's been, the last 3 years and a bit at Nanopay. As Sunil mentioned earlier, overall, I've been in payments for about 20 years, with 7 of them at Citibank and then 11 at an merchant acquiring space.
So I think one thing matches. Both of us have the same kind of experience. I think like us, probably for Nanopay also, banks is one of the big division that you have. Having spent years at arguably the world's leading global transaction bank, which is Citibank, before Nanopay, what is it about the product management that fascinates you? And how did you end up at an early stage startup?
Yeah, so I think the two, established large FI like Citibank and a startup fintech are very different environments. And I think it very much comes to preference of personality, like what you're seeking for. For me personally, I found it difficult to drive change in a large organization like Citi. So especially when you need regional buy-in from all the regions, multiple various levels, you get approvals across the board because of an institution that's so big in size. So, and just on top of that, a lot of the decision-making also stems from headquarters in these large FIs, which in Citi's case is New York. So generally speaking, for a country like Canada, when we're trying to make decisions, it can be quite frustrating because you have to go through multiple levels and it takes a lot of time to make decisions. I think in general, being at Nanopay and being in product management here, I think having the freedom and ability to drive changes quickly is what I love the most. So be able to just make a decision fast, right? So you can seize opportunities instead of, again, getting approvals from 50 different levels. I think it's so important to be able to pivot quickly. That's what makes us agile and adaptive. So if something's not working, go change it, right? If there's a process that's not working, go define it. And if there's an untapped opportunity, go tap into it, which is the key for product management. Overall, I think what I do want to say was I was actually happy at Citi. Citi treated me really well. And I wasn't looking at the time, but I'm really glad Nanopay found me. I think this type of fast-paced environment is where I realize I thrive the most.
Absolutely well said. I think Citi is one of the best organizations that you can work for. But you spoke about personality, and I think change management clubbed with agility, and that is what all of us love. And I think you said it very rightly. So as an outsider, Liquid Rail is one of the Nanopay offerings that excites us. Being a cross-border payment solution, I'm sure it must have had its share of challenges. So as per you, what has been the biggest challenge your experience working with different stakeholders from different countries or different functions?
Yeah, sure. So just a bit of background, I guess, for the audience in terms of Liquid Rail, which is the product that we're talking about. So the problem space that it's focused on solving is traditional cross-border payments, right? They're usually conducted through wire transfers from one bank to another through correspondent banking networks. And that's expensive, it's slow, and it lacks traceability. So when you think about even large corporates, many of their cross-border intercompany payments, they're still made through wires. So Liquid Rail provides the advantage of real-time 24/7 cross-border payments with finality, leveraging our centralized blockchain technology at Nanopay. It enables banks and their bank partners to create like a real-time payments network amongst themselves. And then they can use our ledger to net payments and significantly reduce the amount of payments that need to funnel through external rails. So the biggest challenge, definitely regulatory and compliance come to mind. It's a big one. And it's critical because missteps could lead to enormous fines, severe reputational damage. Each country, for example, has its own unique requirements for reporting of cross-border payments, right? So compliance of some of those requirements, it'll naturally increase the number of data elements, details that's needed to be compliant. And then the regulations differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction as well. So, one of the biggest learnings, it's one of the early, but the biggest hurdles that we usually go through for a product solution like this. And then interoperability, it comes to mind, like even with ISO 222, it's still going to be nuances in implementation from country to country. And the bigger problem is that everyone is at different stages in the adoption process, which is always a challenge. So generally speaking, this leads to a really slow process on our side when it comes to implementation. And these are multi-year projects that span some time.
So Ivy, tell me one thing. What is the fascination about this word rail? You got liquid rail and then Canada's got real-time rail. Well, okay, that was on the lighter side. And then I think you spoke quite well about cross-border payments, data, compliance. I think all of them are very, very important for the growth of digital payments across the globe. So now, without further delay, let's get into the topic for the day. That is culture of payments, finding the right strategy for each market. The evolution of payments has been one of the most fascinating journeys that we've witnessed over the last few years, especially the last decade. But what has been even more fascinating is that each country took its own path and has reached their own juncture. As an individual or organization with interests in multiple countries, this difference in culture of payments poses few challenges. I suppose if it's a challenge or opportunity is up to the individual or the organization. While Aadhaar and UPI drove the digital adoption in payments in India, Canada had its own journey. Ivy, as an individual with considerable experience in the Canadian fintech sector, how do you describe the ecosystem and where do you place it in comparison to other geographies?
Yeah, sure. So I think, talking about the Canadian fintech ecosystem, which is where I am, it's growing rapidly. So Nanopay is in fact located in the central fintech hub, which is Toronto. Our other large fintech hub is in Montreal, and I think both are actually amongst the fastest growing in the world. So when you look at Canada, Toronto is actually ranked 8th. Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, they're all within the top 16 globally. And what a lot of people actually don't know is that Toronto has the densest cluster of AI startups in the world. So I would say I'm definitely in the right spot.
I think Canada has a lot of fintech hubs, and that's the biggest reason of the success of fintech or AI in Canada. And glad to know about Toronto, one of the best cities that you can have. You guys are also gearing up for real-time payments. And there have been a lot of talk about the implementation of ISO 222 in payments. So what are your views on that? And what impacts do you feel it is going to make?
I mean, it's the emerging global and open standard for payments messaging. So I think adoption of ISO 222 is clearly now more of a question of when rather than if. And I think it's important. We need to have a common set of messages and language that we can use across the world so that there's interoperability between the international payment systems. Now, if you think about a real-time payments perspective, the key thing is we need to have a common standard that everyone is working as a baseline from, the common language which we build from, and this would be it. With the adoption of change, any adoption of change, the speed of change is always a challenge. And I find that especially true when things aren't regulatory mandated and when there's no cutoff. So I think what we need to do is focus on recognizing the benefits, right? So ISO 20022 is going to provide significantly richer, better structured data. If you think of other message types like traditional thin, empty messages, they truncate certain fields. And it's always been a massive headache and nightmare for a lot of the businesses. But this method supports extended remittance information, which is one of the key. It would also support automated reconciliation, straight through processing. And reconciliation, as you know, is one of the biggest problems in the industry, right? It's reconciliation. I also think it's going to be make it easier for data to be exchanged with other service providers, tech partners, customers, when everyone's using the same standard. As a fintech, I think it's important when being considered as modern tech providers for the future that we're also ISO 222 enabled. So take Nanopay, ISO 222 messaging has been fully modeled in the Nanopay system. So this means that we can both read and write payment messages. And our focus now is in just ensuring that we're maintaining the most recent versions of the ISO 222 messages.
Absolutely fantastic. I think this was one of the best points that I wanted to discuss with you. You spoke about common set of language, interoperability, common standard, and you said speed of change is nothing without regulatory being uniform. And you also spoke about data to be exchanged with the tech partners. I think there is enough to be learned. So we can clearly see now how different the Indian and the Canadian journey have been in payments. And this difference is quite universal as well, with different countries being at different growth curves. Why do you think this has been the case?
Well, I think banked versus unbanked or underbanked areas is a major factor here. So being in unbanked areas or underbanked areas focuses on development payment solutions that provide access to financial system for people who can't afford accounts or don't have access to bank accounts. So naturally, you're just going to see a much higher adoption rate in digital solutions like mobile wallets. Like think of WeChat, developed by Tencent, and Alipay, right? Another mobile online payment platform developed by Alibaba. They're both in China, and China has the world's largest unbanked population of 225 million adults without an account, which I think is followed by India actually at 190 million from what I remember. And many of the unbanked or underbanked countries, couldn't afford the luxury initially of building those payment infrastructures that's existed in North America. And I think it's actually inadvertently forced or accelerated the growth rate of digital payments. And now it's actually a benefit not having to deal with legacy solutions that we have to go through. So being in a bank country like Canada, North America, US, we still use, for example, a lot of checks, which to me adds time and expense to the process. And in fact, I argue because we have the infrastructure, it's actually slowing down our digital payments journey. Because there's an alternative payment method like checks, and many are still using that. And B, because our existing infrastructure has been around for so long that it's ingrained, and we've built our processes around that now. So I find it really difficult for us now to change and adopt new solutions as a whole.
Well, I think coming from India, the words which is banked versus unbanked, underbanked, absolutely true. You spoke about the numbers as well. One very interesting point was that payment infrastructure is costly. So it was a blessing in disguise for a country like us that we had to straight away move to digital payments. So, and you're right that it was a blessing in disguise. But it's very surprising, though I know, but for the listeners probably, that a developed country like Canada is still believing in checks. And something like that or something like a settled payment infrastructure is actually pulling the growth down for something like digital payments. Absolutely a wonderful or a very surprising story, actually. So, irrespective of the juncture each country is at in digital adoption, we see a huge uptick globally during the global pandemic. More so in case of contactless payments. As the age-old saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. What do you feel are the next innovations in line?
Yeah, so I think we've seen a significant increase in the use of digital payments since the pandemic, specifically contactless payments. The overall usage has risen 150% on average, right, in North America. No one wants to be touching physical cash or coins that can easily spread the bacteria and germs. In fact, Canada's raised the contactless limit since the pandemic. So that's not requiring, physical swiping of the card, not needing PIN or signature. So you just need to tap it to $250. And that's originally from $100 before the pandemic. And this is a permanent increase in the firmware of all the devices. I think next in line for innovation, I think COVID will accelerate the arrival of digital currencies. And I actually think this will drive us forward to CBDC, which is central bank digital currency. And this is basically digital version of fiat money that's issued by the central banks. As I mentioned earlier, there's a declining use of physical cash. So I think CBDC would decrease the cost of minting or issuing physical currency. It'll drive efficiencies, and for less developed countries, this would help drive financial inclusion. More than 60 countries right now are at some stage in assessing or developing a digital currency. China is the furthest along. They're piloting the digital yuan. From a technology perspective, I think blockchain definitely comes to mind as a new innovative technology that CBDC could be built for a variety of reasons. It allows control of the currency offering. And the big thing is that it's tamper-proof, immutable. It has a transparent ledger, secured by cryptography. It does come with challenges, though, that many are probably aware of. So there's concerns around speed and scalability. So many are still weighing the benefits. Either way, I think the pandemic is going to bring us to a decision point sooner than anticipated on CBDC and its future.
Very well said, Ivy. With AGS Horizon, we are also trying for continuous innovation along with global synergies. And that is where synergies with someone like Nanopay Corporation and getting expert view from leaders like you helps us a lot. Indeed, a very good growth. You talked about the new limit of $250, which is 150% growth over the last limit of contactless transaction. I think digital currency along with CBDC is a very apt initiative for the current digital transformation. In India, both cash and digital are growing. Of course, digital is growing at a much rapid pace, mainly because of an overall boom in the economy, barring a short-term COVID dent. And at AGS, we are blessed to be amongst the very few leading players who are doing both cash and digital payments. Okay, so Nanopay has been at the forefront of blockchain technology, winning Blockchain Company of the Year for the Canada FinTech and AI Awards. Congratulations for that. Can you tell me a little bit more about how Nanopay's blockchain is unique?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first thing is when many people think of blockchain, they think of decentralized public ledgers. So Nanopay is different. We run on a centralized blockchain ledger, which means that unlike DLT, where it requires consensus amongst its participants, there's a trusted centralized authority, so centralized control. We find it more acceptable for many banks that we work with, that they're not really comfortable with a trustless network. And because we're centralized, we don't have the scalability concerns. So to give you an example, we can process 30 times faster than the fastest DLT solution out there. So it requires less hardware for us to scale. Another key difference, and most people hear about blockchain, they think about automatically, cryptocurrencies. We digitize fiat currency. So DLT converts to crypto. At the end of the day, though, we're still using blockchain. So it's the way that our data is being stored, and it still has the benefits of mutability, transparency, and security that you usually get with a blockchain solution without the scalability concerns. And I think that's one of the reasons why we won the Blockchain of the Year award last year. We have a very different blockchain solution, and we advertise that as our centralized hybrid blockchain ledger.
So I would surely like to understand more about this post the podcast. I think it's a very, very interesting topic, and the way Nanopay has dealt with it is absolutely marvelous. You spoke about, I think for listeners, this would be a very, very new concept, which is a centralized blockchain. And you're saying that banks are more comfortable with that. It makes you more scalable and faster. I think that's the reason that you've been winning awards, and kudos to that. So great to hear that. And wish you and Nanopay all the best for all your future endeavors. To conclude the discussion, I just want to get yours and the organization's perspective on the overall future of payments across the world.
Yeah, I think it's such an exciting time to be in payments. I mean, there's so much going on and there's just no shortage on innovation. You think of payment modernization efforts around the world, everyone's moving to real-time payments. I know India's already there, but enabling real-time liquidity, open banking, which I think is going to be a huge catalyst for new innovative solutions that will give users a different set of solutions to buy in the market. We've been rolling out Nanopay virtual cards, virtual accounts, digital wallet solutions, and I think they're all very forward-thinking solutions. There's emerging technologies like blockchain and the rise of AI, machine learning, and I think it makes many things possible that wasn't possible before. I think the banking industry is actually, and I came from there, right? But I think it's going to go through a significant change. Banking is not going to look the same in 10 years' time as it does today. So many new fintechs are able to provide payment solutions that are cheaper, more frictionless, they're faster, and they have much more innovative, flexible, customizable solutions for the customer. And in general, I think it's going to be lowering the cost of these solutions to a price point that is much more acceptable. I'm just certain now that payments for the last 20 years has been the right path for me, and just super excited to see what's in store for the next 20.
Payment modernization, real-time liquidity, open banking, Nanopay virtual cards and other solutions, AI and machine learning, we all know. And you're right, banking would not be the same. You spoke about 10 years, I think even now, or probably by 2025, I think it'll be a complete different ballgame. And you said three very, very important words about fintech. So they're cheaper, faster, and flexible. I think that is what makes them the best. And that we are trying to integrate with fintechs like you because of that. So thanks again, Ivy. So that's all I got.
No
I
problem.
really thank you for your time. And it's been a pleasure and privilege to host you. Hope you had a good time too. Any suggestions or comments to improve our journey through the podcast series?
No, I think the topics are very relevant. I think we've nailed a bunch of topics that are important to the focus of payments. What may be also helpful is we dive, maybe have separate podcast sessions to dive deeper into the relevant topics as well. But overall, I think this is great what you're doing, and it should be really relevant for the time and for the audience.
You're absolutely right. I think this 20-25 minute session is not enough. Each topic deserves a different podcast. We would love to do that, but I don't know whether with so many awards that you're winning, you would have time to be with us again. We would love to be with you. But thanks again. I think now the listeners would want to know more about how do they reach you or Nanopay Corporation.
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Ivy Lu, spelled IVYLUU. Feel free to reach out. And Nanopay, feel free to check us out. It's www.nanopay.net. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure is all ours. My special thanks to all our dear listeners. Hope you had a great time too. If you liked what you heard, please like and follow. If you have any suggestions, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us through our social media handles. All links are given in the description. We have more in line, so don't miss out on any of our podcasts. So, stay tuned, take care, and keep socially distant, but digitally together. And it's a cut.